Ravens center Tyler Linderbaum offered a blunt assessment of the current state of his red zone offense. And when I say his, he and Lamar obviously point guard this offense, and it's all dialed and executed by Todd Monken and company. If you really think about it from an execution standpoint, that's on the players. Todd manages it. Let's call it that. Bo Smolka from Press Box caught up with Tyler in a media scrum yesterday in the locker room. And he noted that Linderbaum says the red zone issues come down to not being able to run the ball well enough. Quote, that starts with us, the O-line. He says he has no doubt they have the guys in the room to do it, but it has to be better. Well, if this isn't the perfect segue to discussing who's in the room. You talking about the current starting five that we've seen every single week so far this year? Or are you talking about some guys that could be waiting in the wings? John Harbaugh talked about Emory Jones, the rookie day 2 pick, a third rounder out of LSU who was drafted to be a tackle, recently switched to guard in terms of the label next to his name, now says G instead of T. He played both positions while at LSU. And this certainly caught some of your attention yesterday when Harbaugh had this to say about the ongoing not only recovery timetable for Emory, having underwent a labrum procedure after the combine in March, but also a player that was just recently activated from the non-football injury list and perhaps could be gearing up to make his first regular season snap. Dare I say start? I don't know. We'll have to wait for pregame warmups on Sunday against the Jets. But here's Harbaugh speaking rather glowingly.
Good progress. Very quick progress. You know, it's only been about 3 to 4 weeks. One of the weeks was a no padded. It was a Thursday night week. I think his first week was the Miami game, right? So I would say he's made excellent progress, and he's getting pretty close to being ready to play.
All right. So when you look at this glaring statistic that the Ravens are having to address, need to address their red zone deficiencies, and knowing that when they get inside the 20, they're scoring touchdowns less than 50% of the time, which ranks 28th league-wide, you ask yourself, what needs to change? Well, first and foremost, they got to be better up front. I think we know that. Got to get more push, got to have more pass protection, got to be more consistent. Got to call it more consistently, as Todd Monken is always quick to noting. But perhaps could a personnel change help in that regard? We know that the weakest link and links have been right guard and left guard, respectively, Daniel Fa'alele and Andrew Voorhees this year. Voorhees has been okay when it comes to the run game, has really struggled in pass pro, as has Daniel Fa'alele, and 77 certainly had a target on his back much throughout that game on Sunday in Cleveland. When it comes to Emory Jones, though, while it's a player that has yet to log a regular season snap in his young career, having just been drafted, everybody's speaking glowingly of this dude. Jeff Zaribek notes on the Collective earlier this week that he's been busting his butt and is a physical specimen in practice. You heard what John Harbaugh just shared, went out of his way to make it clear that he's almost ahead of schedule. I'll go back to Todd Monken last month, not long after Emory was activated from the NFI to the 53-man roster. He had this to say.
I'm excited. I mean, he's worked awfully hard to get back. From what I see, he's everything we hoped he'd be at this point. You know, when you don't go through training camp and you only have 1 day in pads, that's really hard to say. But he's diligent. He's tough. He's a Raven. I mean, you can see that. I mean, he fits here. We have been playing him at a couple positions just to get him comfortable.
Okay, so, and Ijan, is it Ijan? Ijan Karstofen? Hopefully I'm not botching that. Ijan says Harbaugh won't change the offensive line. Lamar won't criticize the offensive line publicly. Of course he won't. And Monken won't call red zone plays for DeAndre Hopkins, Tez Walker, And as many targets as Zay gets, he doesn't score enough. And as many targets as Zay gets, he doesn't score enough. He's the number one wide receiver, number one pass catcher for them, though, and has a great feel for soft spots in zone coverage. Obviously can take the top off of a defense. I'll add one more name in here. And by the way, Ijan, we don't know if Harbaugh will make changes here. It's certainly, as you read the tea leaves and we all watch the product that they've put on the field from an offensive line standpoint, if I'm a betting man, I think there will be a change between, let's call it now and Thanksgiving night, 1 week from today when the Ravens and Bengals play. And I do believe that Emory Jones is going to get a chance. I'm starting to really think that. And of course, Lamar is not going to criticize his offensive line publicly. He's never criticized really anyone within the organization, with exception when this was indirectly. Remember when he essentially suggested that an opponent knew Greg Roman's calls? That was years ago, towards the end of the Greg Roman era. But I'll add one more name in here when it comes to red zone targets. Let's not forget that Rashad Bateman not only was extremely productive last year overall, tallying up 9 touchdowns, but he was an absolute menace for them in the red zone. And while this was the first game without him this past week in Cleveland, they might be having to figure out life without him for a multi-week timetable, because high ankle sprains tend to linger, and they tend to come with that, 3 to 6, somewhere in there, 2 to 6 week overall span. That's an area that they're missing him in. They're obviously missing things as well because of what Tyler Linderbaum got at, rather bluntly. That starts with us, the offensive line. They have not been able to run the ball effectively enough. And I thought Chris Cooper did a good job of talking about and specifically pinpointing, and Chris is a great follow for those of you who enjoy the X's and O's nitty-gritty part of football in the Twitter space. When things have gone right for them on the ground is what Chris took a deep dive on and tweeted something out earlier this morning that caught my eye. And here it is. The King has 6 explosive runs this season, which is the threshold is 25 or more yards. Okay. And you see the personnel, you see the formations, and you see the schemes that they were in for those 6 explosive runs. And as Chris summarizes, as the common denominator, it's heavy personnel, it's downhill alignments, and schemes that create clean second-level access. And there have been 6 of them this year. Sure, the Ravens would have and probably definitely had more at this point in the season last year, but this is where they currently sit in that department. And so they can take something from this. And by the way, he tallied up those 6. Hopefully we don't get dinged from a copyright perspective. But here they are. This was week 1 against Buffalo. We all remember this specific play. I'll have another clip on that in just a second. And you see what goes right for the Ravens. Here's another one. Beat up Buffalo week 1. And what do they have to show for it? Nothing. A loss because of a fourth quarter collapse. Before things collapsed in Detroit, I should say in Baltimore on Monday Night Football against Detroit, they had some success there with a big Derrick Henry run. And the same with this one. He had a quiet night outside of this run for the most part against Miami. Lamar did most of his damage through the air. And then just this past Sunday in Cleveland, we all remember this one. What a play. Great execution from his lead blockers. And here's that specific run again from a different angle. Ben Solak clipped this one. Look at the guys that do their job and look at 42. Pat may not be 100%, having missed the majority of the first half of the season with that calf. But look what he does here. It's easy to get lost in the sauce here, but watch 42 immediately insert himself, opening up this gap for the King, who does the rest. A couple forced missed tackles. They're capable of running the football, guys. They're capable, but it's going to have to be done very specifically. and mindfully. And you see it. Where's it going to be? Live in heavy personnel. Live in those downhill alignments. Get to the second level, because when 22 is at the second level, he looks like the 22 of old. And again, I want to piggyback off of what Mina said. Lamar has not lost a step. Derek has not lost a step. Lamar's banged up, and this offensive line has been the most inconsistent part. It's hard to say that given the first 5 weeks defensively. But this offensive line has been the weak link over the 10-game sample size in Baltimore so far, to the tune of a 5-5 record with a lot more work to do if you want to win this division. Well done by Chris there. Go follow him at Chris Cooper _NFL. You heard what John Harbaugh had to say about Emory Jones, the Rook. Could there potentially be a change in the second half on Sunday if we start to manifest a double-digit cushion that perhaps the Ravens build themselves up against a Jets team that's going nowhere fast? And my pal Jake Asman, who covers them, God bless the guy, he's already looking at NFL draft and mock simulations for his team that inevitably is going to have to be back in the quarterback market coming up in April's draft. So, speaking of those Jets, Tyrod Taylor will make his first start of the season. They've benched Justin Fields, and in comes Tyrod, and it's going to be a reuniting, if you will, in Baltimore, having been drafted on day 3 by these Ravens all the way back in 2011.
Going back to the place where it all started for you.
It's a full circle moment for sure. Thankful for my time in Baltimore. I learned a lot from the coaches there, to the players within that locker room. Learned a lot about football. Learned a lot about how to carry myself off the field as well too. Like I said, just forever thankful for the 4 years that I spent there. I have a lot of friends in that building still. It's been a while since I went back there to play, but yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity for us to have a very good team, and we're looking forward to stepping up to the challenge this weekend.
Well, first of all, I misspoke there. This will be his second start of the season for Tyrod Taylor, who is still in this league at 36 years young, a 6th-round pick out of Virginia Tech in 2011, spent his first 4 years with the Ravens, and as you heard there, he is very, very fond of his time looking back. As you look at the NFL Network game preview picks, it is a clean sweep across the board led by Daniel Jeremiah. Everybody thinks the Ravens will find a way to win against a Jets team that is 2-8. Yes, they've beaten 2 teams, both of which I should say are in the AFC North. They beat Cincinnati in week 8 and they beat Cleveland in week 10. But this is a Jets team that just went through a fire sale defensively prior to the deadline, most notably losing Quinnen Williams to Dallas. And when I say losing, they opted to lose Quinnen Williams, and they are in full-blown rebuild. Got to have it if you're the Ravens. And again, if you do, maybe you do end up getting a look at a guy in Emory Jones, or maybe Emory, they just start to evaluate this game and they say to themselves, you know what? This is the game to do it. I'll have to wait and see. Hey, speaking of AFC North play, this is going to be really interesting to see what's going on with Joe Burrow and company. Does Joe have a legitimate chance to not only play this weekend, but to be available a week from now when the Ravens and Bengals play for the first time and the first of 2 over a 3-week span, Thanksgiving night at the bank? Joe is 2 months removed from his, what we thought, maybe it was never described as a season-ending toe procedure, but certainly one that threatened his season. Yet 2 months later, he was a full participant in practice. Zach Taylor earlier this morning on local radio in Cincinnati did not rule out the possibility of Burrow playing against New England coming up on Sunday. And then, of course, a lot to ask on that kind of turnaround, knowing that 5 days later, you'll play the Ravens on Thursday Night Football, Thanksgiving night. Now, Evan and I had an exchange in the Discord group earlier today, and I was like, look, they almost need him to come back. They're 3-7. And Evan in response was like, no, like why even? Like they don't have a legitimate shot. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but they're not mathematically out of it. So do they almost owe it? Does Joe owe it to the fan base, the organization, to get himself back out there and try and salvage whatever's left of this season? They're 3-7. Their defense is their Achilles heel, and that's putting it lightly. They've really struggled. They've had a bunch of different quarterbacks in and out of the lineup this season, traded for Joe Flacco. And what will you have in Joe Burrow, who I'm sure will be dealing with rust, having been sidelined for the last couple months? We'll see. But compelling right now that Joe's actually going to legitimately give it a shot coming up on Sunday against the Patriots, who's letting it rip under Mike Vrabel year one. Adisa Isaac, been a while and it's been pretty quiet on this front since we last heard from John Harbaugh. I believe it was within the last few weeks or so. I remember he dislocated his elbow and sustained some ligament damage during the preseason. And mid-October, I just pulled up a tweet that I had bookmarked from Jeff after Harbaugh's press conference last month. He shared that he didn't expect Adisa back until mid to late November. Well, we are in mid to late November as we speak. Adisa was a third-round pick out of Penn State at the outside linebacker position back in 2024 and has only played in 4 games with the Ravens. So a disappointing start to his career as a day 2 pick for them. And as you see on the screen, I took this screenshot from his Instagram page. And as of yesterday, it appeared that he was rehabbing in New York. So just as we kind of keep up with injured players, injured Baltimore Ravens, Adisa Isaac looks to be nursing and rehabbing that dislocated left elbow, as you see from his Instagram page. Speaking of injured players and guys that are working their tail off to get back, John Harbaugh shared yesterday that Tavius Robinson and Ardarius Washington are, quote, getting close. Tavius had a foot injury pop up within the last month. And Ardarius tore his Achilles in an off-season conditioning session that was on site in Baltimore. Brian McFarland, Ravens salary cap analyst, with a couple notes here. Robinson, 4 games. And Ardarius, 10 games, have been on the injured reserve, physically unable to perform list for a required minimum of 4 games. So both are eligible to be designated to return and start their 21-day practice periods at any point now once they are deemed ready to go. I have no idea what they would have in Ardarius coming back on that kind of turnaround after sustaining that Achilles tear. But one thing we saw last year, that when Ardarius stays healthy, he is a dog. He is a stabilizing force. He has a knack for the football. He is a high IQ, physical player. And he and Kyle Hamilton, man, from week 10, what was it on last year? They really brought a sense of calming force to the back end of Zach Orr's secondary. We'll see how he's factored in to the equation when that 21-day practice period opens up for both he and a guy up front they're going to need as well this closing stretch in Tavius Robinson.